It was a crisp autumn morning in Manhattan, the kind that painted the skyline in shades of amber and gold. Michael Donovan, the renowned billionaire CEO of Vanguard Enterprises, sat in his expansive office on the 74th floor of the Donovan Tower. The city buzzed beneath him, yet within the silent confines of his glass-walled sanctuary, the chaos of New York felt like a distant hum. Today, however, something had broken through the routine. A small, inconspicuous package rested on his desk, wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with a simple string. The sender's name, printed in delicate cursive, stopped him cold. Eleanor Blackwood, his ex-wife. Michael stared at the package, his chest tightening. It had been a year since the divorce, a year since the last fiery argument had sealed their fate. Eleanor had been the one person who truly knew him, the flawed, vulnerable man behind the public mask of the unstoppable business mogul. Their parting had left him hollow. Though he'd told himself he was fine, that time would mend the rift in his soul, but time hadn't. It had only deepened the silence. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, shattering his trance. "Mr. Donovan, the board is ready for you in the main conference room." He cleared his throat, running a hand through his meticulously styled hair. "I'll be down shortly." Michael picked up the package, its weight both literal and symbolic, and placed it in his briefcase. The questions gnawed at him. Why now? What was inside? He pushed them aside, focusing on the board meeting ahead. The meeting dragged on, a relentless stream of profit charts and projections. But Michael's mind was elsewhere. The weight of the package in his briefcase was inescapable. Every now and then he caught himself drifting into memories. The way Eleanor's laughter used to fill their home, the quiet mornings they'd spent on their balcony overlooking the Hudson, the whispered dreams of a future that would never come to pass. As the meeting concluded, the board members filed out, each offering polite nods. Michael stayed behind, staring out at the sprawling city below. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He retrieved the package and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a black leather-bound notebook. Its texture was familiar, the faint scent of aged paper stirring something deep within him. A small note was tucked beneath the notebook's elastic band. Michael unfolded it, his breath catching as he recognized Eleanor's handwriting. "Michael, I found this while going through some old things. I thought you might want it back. Read it. It's important." Eleanor. His fingers trembled as he opened the notebook. It was his journal, one he'd kept during their marriage but had discarded in a fit of anger the night they separated. He hadn't thought of it since. Flipping through its pages, he was struck by the rawness of his entries. The words chronicled his hopes, his fears, and his love for Eleanor, before everything had fallen apart. One entry stood out, dated 3 months before their divorce. "Eleanor is my anchor. I don't tell her enough how much she means to me, but without her I don't think I'd survive this chaos. She's the only real thing in my world of smoke and mirrors. I need to find a way to show her, before it's too late." Michael's chest ached as he read. He'd written those words but had never acted on them. By the time he'd realized how far they'd drifted apart, it had been too late. The day blurred into evening, and Michael found himself at his penthouse, the journal and note clutched in his hands. He poured a glass of whiskey and sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's lights twinkling like distant stars. As he read more entries, memories flooded back. He could almost hear Eleanor's voice, see the way she'd curl up on their couch with a book, or feel the warmth of her hand in his. But it wasn't just nostalgia. There was something else, something he'd missed. Buried in his own pride and ambition, he'd failed to see her pain, her longing for a version of him that had been lost in the whirlwind of success. Near the back of the journal, another folded note fell out, this one in his handwriting. It was addressed to Eleanor. He didn't remember writing it, but the words pierced through him. "Eleanor, I know I've let you down. You've given me everything, your love, your patience, your heart, and I've been too blind to appreciate it. I don't deserve you, but I promise to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Michael." Tears blurred his vision. He had written it, but he'd never given it to her. Michael didn't sleep that night. He sat with the journal, the memories, and the weight of his mistakes. By dawn, he had made a decision. For the first time in a year, he was going to see Eleanor. As he stepped outside, the cold morning air biting at his skin, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. But he didn't know that what awaited him at Eleanor's door would change his life forever. Michael stood outside Eleanor's townhouse in the quiet neighborhood of Tribeca. The world seemed muted, as if holding its breath for what was about to unfold. The modest brick facade contrasted sharply with his sleek and modern penthouse, but it was fitting. Eleanor had always preferred substance over flash, depth over appearances. Clutching the journal and her note, Michael hesitated. A year had passed since he last stood here, and it felt like a lifetime. Would she even want to see him? Or had this package simply been her way of offering closure? He inhaled deeply, steadying himself. It was time to find out. The soft chime of the doorbell broke the stillness. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing Eleanor. Her dark auburn hair, slightly tousled, framed her face, and her eyes, those eyes he had once been able to read like a book, were guarded. She looked at him, surprised but composed. "Michael." Her voice was calm, tinged with curiosity and caution. "Eleanor." He faltered, unsure where to begin. "I got your package." She crossed her arms, leaning lightly against the doorframe. "I figured you would." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between them. Finally, Eleanor sighed and stepped aside. "Come in." The living room was warm and inviting, just as he remembered. Soft lighting illuminated shelves filled with books, and a faint scent of lavender lingered in the air. He noticed subtle changes: new pillows on the couch, a different arrangement of photographs on the mantel. One picture caught his eye: Eleanor, standing on a beach laughing with a group of friends. She looked happy, genuinely happy. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the couch. She took the armchair opposite him, maintaining a deliberate distance. Michael placed the journal on the coffee table between them. "I didn't expect to see this again," he began, "or to hear from you at all." Eleanor tilted her head, studying him. "I wasn't sure if I should send it, but I found it while cleaning out some old things, and I thought it might mean something to you." "It does," he said quietly, running a hand over the worn leather cover. "I've spent the last 24 hours reading it, reliving everything." He looked up at her, his voice softening. "It reminded me of what I lost, of what I threw away." Eleanor's gaze didn't waver. "Michael, I didn't send it to reopen old wounds. I sent it because I thought it might help you move on, to find closure." Michael leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "But what if I don't want closure? What if—" "Stop!" Her voice was firm but not unkind. "Don't do this, Michael. Don't come here and make this harder than it needs to be." Her heart was pounding, though she kept her composure. Seeing Michael again stirred a flood of emotions she thought she had buried: anger, sadness, longing. The year apart had given her clarity, but it hadn't erased the pain. She had loved him deeply, but their marriage had been suffocating, a relentless push and pull between his ambition and her need for connection. She had sent the journal as a gesture of goodwill, not expecting him to show up on her doorstep. Yet here he was, looking as confident and polished as ever, but with an undercurrent of vulnerability she hadn't seen in years. "I've changed, Eleanor," he said, breaking the silence. "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I have. Losing you made me realize how blind I was, how much I took you for granted." She shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "Michael, it's not that simple. Love isn't a switch you can turn on and off, and neither is trust. Do you even know why our marriage fell apart?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Because I was selfish. I put my career above everything else, above you." "That's part of it," she said, her voice softening. "But it wasn't just your career. It was the way you stopped letting me in. You built walls around yourself and I couldn't reach you anymore. I felt like a ghost in our own home." Michael bowed his head, her words cutting deep. "I know, and I hate myself for it. But I want to make it right. I don't care how long it takes. I'll prove to you that I'm not the man I was." Eleanor leaned back, her arms crossed defensively. "Why now? What's changed?" He looked at her, his expression earnest. "Because I've finally stopped lying to myself. I used to think I could fill the void with success, with money, with everything except what really mattered. But none of it means anything without you." Her resolve wavered. Part of her wanted to believe him, to take a chance on the man she had once loved with all her heart. But another part of her, the part that had spent countless nights crying alone, screamed for caution. "Michael," she said carefully, "you can't just walk back into my life and expect me to forget everything that happened. It doesn't work that way." "I know," he replied, his voice steady. I'm not asking for forgiveness overnight. I'm asking for a chance to show you that I've changed, to show you that I can be the man you deserve." Eleanor studied him, her mind racing. He seemed sincere, but sincerity alone wasn't enough. She needed proof, not promises. "Why don't we start with honesty?" she said. "What brought you here today? Was it really just the journal?" Michael hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but reading it made me realize how much I've missed you, how much I still love you." The raw emotion in his voice caught her off guard. She had expected him to be polished, rehearsed, the consummate CEO even in personal matters. But this was different. This was real. The conversation stretched into the evening, weaving through memories, regrets, and unspoken truths. Michael opened up in a way he never had before, sharing stories of sleepless nights, empty victories, and the deep loneliness that had consumed him since their divorce. Eleanor listened, her walls slowly crumbling under the weight of his vulnerability. But she didn't let herself forget the pain. "I appreciate your honesty, Michael. I really do. But I can't promise anything. This isn't something I can decide in one night." "I understand," he said, standing to leave. "But I'm not giving up. Whatever it takes, Eleanor, I'll prove to you that I'm worth another chance." As he reached the door, she called after him. "Michael." He turned, hope flickering in his eyes. "Don't make promises you can't keep," she said softly. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I won't." That night, Eleanor lay awake, her mind replaying their conversation. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stir within her, a glimmer of hope, tempered by caution. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: the walls she had built around her heart weren't as impenetrable as she had thought. As dawn broke over the city, she made a decision. If Michael wanted to prove himself, she would give him the opportunity. But she wouldn't make it easy. If he truly loved her, he would have to earn her trust, step by step, moment by moment. And deep down, she realized, part of her wanted him to succeed. The following weeks unfolded like a careful dance, one step forward and two steps back. Michael reached out to Eleanor with a patience that surprised even him, keeping his promises to respect her boundaries while persistently finding ways to show he had changed. He began sending small, thoughtful gestures, handwritten notes, books he knew she loved, even a playlist of songs they'd once danced to in their living room late at night. Nothing extravagant, just subtle reminders of the life they had shared and the life he hoped they might rebuild. For Eleanor, it was both infuriating and endearing. She told herself she wasn't ready to forgive him, that these were just surface-level attempts to smooth over years of hurt. Yet, every time she read one of his notes or saw his name flash across her phone, her heart betrayed her, skipping a beat. Against her better judgment, she started responding, her messages cautious but less clipped than before. And so, a tentative bridge began to form between them. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Eleanor found herself sitting at a corner table in a quiet cafe. The windows were streaked with droplets, blurring the bustling street outside. Michael had invited her to coffee, and after a week of wavering, she had agreed. Now, as she stirred her latte absently, she wondered if it had been a mistake. Michael arrived precisely on time, as always, his presence commanding yet softer than she remembered. He smiled warmly as he approached, holding up a paper bag. "I brought croissants," he said, setting them on the table. "Figured it was safer than trusting the cafe's selection." She raised an eyebrow, trying to suppress a smile. "Still a control freak, I see." He laughed, a low, genuine sound. Old habits die hard. They fell into conversation, and to Eleanor's surprise, it felt natural. Michael spoke openly about his struggles, the emptiness of success without meaning, the realization that he had built an empire but lost himself in the process. He told her about the therapy sessions he'd started after their divorce, the work he had been doing to confront his flaws. "I didn't understand back then," he admitted, his voice steady but tinged with regret. "I thought providing for you meant giving you everything money could buy, but I see now that I wasn't giving you what you really needed, what you deserved." Eleanor listened, her defenses wavering. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the weight of his words. But she also knew that change wasn't something that happened overnight. "Michael," she said carefully, "I appreciate what you're saying. I really do. But words only mean so much. It's actions that matter." "I know," he said, nodding, "and I'm ready to prove it, however long it takes." Their cautious reconnection hit its first major test a week later. Eleanor had organized a fundraiser for a local non-profit, an annual event she had poured her heart into for years. Michael had offered to help, but she had declined, insisting she could handle it. Still, he showed up unannounced, stepping into the elegant ballroom where the event was held. Eleanor spotted him immediately, standing near the entrance in a tailored suit that made him look every bit the billionaire CEO. For a moment, irritation flared. This was her night, and she hadn't asked for his presence. But as she watched him mingle effortlessly with the guests, charm radiating from every smile, she couldn't help but feel a pang of admiration. This was a side of Michael she hadn't seen in a long time, someone who wasn't just commanding, but genuinely engaging. Later in the evening, she found him at the bar, sipping a glass of sparkling water. "You just couldn't help yourself, could you?" she said, crossing her arms. Michael turned, a sheepish grin on his face. "Guilty as charged. But in my defense, I thought it might be nice to support you." Eleanor sighed, her annoyance softening. "Just try not to steal the spotlight, okay?" "Wouldn't dream of it," he replied, raising his glass in a mock toast. As the night went on, Eleanor found herself grateful for his presence. He charmed donors into opening their wallets, even securing a significant pledge from a notoriously tight-fisted real estate mogul. By the end of the event, the non-profit had exceeded its fundraising goal, and Eleanor couldn't deny that Michael had played a big part in that success. But when the night ended and the guests began to disperse, a nagging doubt crept into her mind. Was Michael's support truly selfless, or was it another calculated move to win her over? She wasn't sure, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. The turning point came unexpectedly, during a trip Michael had arranged for them to visit a rural community where Vanguard Enterprises was funding a series of educational initiatives. Eleanor had agreed reluctantly, wary of his intentions. But as they toured the small schoolhouse and met the children benefiting from the program, she saw a different side of him, one that was genuine, unguarded. Michael knelt beside a young boy who was clutching a tattered book, his eyes wide with curiosity. "What's your favorite story?" he asked, his tone gentle. The boy hesitated, then whispered, "I like the one about the flying elephant." Michael grinned. "Dumbo, huh? That's a good one. You know, when I was your age, I wanted to be able to fly too." Eleanor watched from a distance, her heart tightening. This wasn't the polished businessman she was used to. This was someone who cared, who connected, who gave without expecting anything in return. For the first time, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had truly changed. That evening, as they walked back to the small inn where they were staying, Michael turned to her. "Thank you for coming with me," he said. "It means a lot." Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "It was eye-opening." He smiled, his eyes searching hers. "Eleanor, I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but what we're doing now, it feels right. I don't want to lose this chance." She looked away, the vulnerability in his voice cutting through her. "Michael, I need time. I need to be sure. And I'll give you all the time you need," he said. "I just want you to know that I'm not going anywhere." That night, Eleanor sat by the window of her room, staring out at the moonlit countryside. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, hope, fear, and the faintest glimmer of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Trust. She didn't know where this journey would lead, but for the first time in years she was willing to find out. In the room next door, Michael lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He had spent his entire life chasing success, but tonight he realized that none of it mattered without Eleanor. He didn't just want her forgiveness, he wanted her heart, and he was prepared to fight for it, no matter how long it took. What neither of them knew was that the greatest test of their rekindled connection was just around the corner, a revelation that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. Michael had been riding the high of their progress, feeling as if he was slowly earning his way back into Eleanor's heart. But nothing could have prepared him for the phone call that came on an otherwise ordinary Wednesday evening. "Mr. Donovan," the voice on the other end said, hesitant but urgent. "There's something you need to know about Eleanor." Michael arrived at the hospital in a blur, his heart pounding. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air as he pushed past the reception desk, barely registering the nurse's directions. Eleanor was in a private room, her pale face a stark contrast to the vibrant woman he'd spent weeks rediscovering. "Eleanor," he whispered, sinking into the chair beside her bed. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment the world seemed to stand still. "Michael." she said weakly, a faint smile playing on her lips. You didn't have to come. Of course I did, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. What happened? She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands which were folded neatly on her lap. It's nothing serious, just a little scare. But Michael wasn't convinced. The doctor's words echoed in his mind. Eleanor has been dealing with this for months. She's stubborn, hasn't let anyone help her, but now she doesn't have a choice. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his tone a mix of concern and frustration. Eleanor sighed, closing her eyes. Because it's not your responsibility, Michael. It never was. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. Don't say that. You don't get to decide what I care about. Her lips trembled, and for a moment she looked like she might cry. I didn't want you to feel obligated. I didn't want to be the reason you— Eleanor, he interrupted, his voice steady but full of conviction. I'm here because I want to be, because I love you. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, treatments, and long quiet nights spent by Eleanor's side. She had been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, manageable but debilitating if left untreated. Michael threw himself into supporting her, balancing his demanding career with the demands of her care. At first, Eleanor resisted. She was fiercely independent, unaccustomed to leaning on anyone, least of all Michael, but his unwavering presence began to wear down her walls. He showed up at every appointment, asked questions, took notes, and even researched alternative therapies. One evening, as they sat together in her living room, Eleanor turned to him, her expression unreadable. Why are you doing this, Michael? After everything that's happened, why stay? He looked at her, his eyes soft but resolute. Because I let you go once, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. I'm not making that mistake again. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly brushed them away. I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this. You don't have to be, he said, taking her hand in his. We'll be strong enough together. Eleanor's condition stabilized over the next few months, and with it came a gradual shift in their relationship. They began to rediscover the parts of each other that had been buried beneath years of pain and misunderstanding. Michael learned to slow down, to be present in the moment, while Eleanor learned to trust again, to believe that Michael's love was real and enduring. One evening, as they walked along the Hudson River, Michael stopped abruptly, pulling her gently to face him. There's something I need to say, he began, his voice steady despite the nerves dancing in his chest. Eleanor looked up at him, her brow furrowed. What is it? He took a deep breath. I don't want to go another day without making this official. Eleanor Blackwood, will you— Michael, she interrupted, a smile tugging at her lips. Are you seriously proposing right now? He grinned, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I am. And before you say anything, let me just say this. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I've made more mistakes than I can count. But I also know that I love you more than anything, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you, if you'll let me. Eleanor stared at him, her heart racing. The old Michael, the one who had been too busy, too distant, too consumed by his work, was gone. In his place stood a man who had fought for her, who had shown her through actions, not words, that he was worthy of her love. Yes, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Michael, I'll marry you. Their wedding was a quiet, intimate affair held in a small chapel upstate. Only their closest friends and family were present, a stark contrast to the grand, impersonal ceremony they had once shared years ago. This time, every detail felt intentional, every moment steeped in meaning. As they exchanged vows, Michael couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. The woman standing before him wasn't just the love of his life. She was his anchor, his partner, his reason for becoming a better man. And as Eleanor looked into his eyes, she saw not just the man she had fallen in love with, but the man who had fought to earn her love again. Months later, as they settled into their new life together, a package arrived at their doorstep. Michael brought it inside, raising an eyebrow as he handed it to Eleanor. Another surprise? He teased. She opened the package, revealing a framed photograph of them on their wedding day, along with a note. May this time be forever. Love, Aunt May. Eleanor laughed, shaking her head. She always was a hopeless romantic. Michael wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. I think she might be onto something. They stood there in their living room, the city lights twinkling outside the window, and for the first time in years, everything felt right. They had faced their past, weathered the storm, and come out stronger on the other side. And as Michael held Eleanor in his arms, he realized that this was the true measure of success, not wealth or power, but the quiet, unshakable certainty of love.